Hello, Jason. How are you?
Well, Ronja, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Welcome everybody to WTF Coaching, Wholesome Twin-Flame Coaching with Jason, Earth Shadow Dancer, and there he's gone, Dr. Ronja Viv. I was hoping he was going to say that, but we'll practice that and do that next time. All right, so last time we were talking about boundaries, and I hope that everybody got something interesting out of that topic. It actually took us 2 episodes to talk about personal boundaries and how they're important for fostering self-love and feeling empowered. But another topic that really is integral to boundaries is self-responsibility. So let's just start off with brainstorming on what self-responsibility really means. Jason, what is your idea of self-responsibility?
As I kind of referred last time, Satguru takes responsibility and really expands the meaning to your ability to respond. And I really love that aspect in that, you know, we get caught up with responsibility being, if I'm responsible for you or your actions, then it's all on me. We look at it more in a blame type situation as opposed to a freeing situation that allows you an ability to act in a situation. And that's, like I say, Satguru's explanation. It's, you know, if somebody has a heart attack and falls over on the side of the room, if you say you're not responsible for that, then you're just going to be uninvolved. I mean, you're not even going to be able to call medical attention, nothing. You've removed yourself from that situation. Whereas if we can grow and expand and understand we can be responsible for everything, you're able to go over and assist and call medical attention. You have an ability to respond to the situation. And in our personal aspects, our personal responsibilities, it's taking that step of saying, I'm able to respond to this situation, I'm able to act in this situation, instead of just playing the blame game and saying, well, that's their fault or that's somebody else's fault. We don't realize it, but when we get into that blame game, we give away all of our power. We let somebody else have that control and say, we're not responsible, it's their fault. And if we can't take that and acknowledge that we had some responsibility in that process, then we can't grow, we can't develop, and we can't understand the lessons that were possibly there for us to learn in that process. Because we've just pawned it off on, it's somebody else's. It wasn't us.
Okay. What did you mean? I found it was intriguing when you said we're giving away our power. What exactly do you mean by that? I remember coaches telling me that all the time, and I remember not understanding back in the day. So I have a better understanding of it now, and I know what is meant by that. But I wonder how you would define that. What do you mean by giving away your power when you blame somebody else?
That's a really interesting aspect because for me, at least historically and in my past, it seems like taking on responsibility is like a burden, something that, you know, socially we've seen in this paradigm of it's something that's going to weigh you down, it's going to put weight on you and be an extra burden that you're carrying. The reality of it, though, whenever you become responsible and are actually able to be responsible for everything in your life and around you and that you encounter, it's empowering. You have a revitalized sense of power because you're not on the outside anymore. You're involved. You're part of the process. Taking that responsibility allows you to be a player in the game instead of sitting on the sidelines and, you know, just observing everybody else's game. It's not that you're weighed down, it's not that you're burdened, but once you realize the deeper aspect of what responsibility is, And you get out of that blame game mentality of, if I take responsibility for this, then everybody's going to blame me if something goes wrong. No, that's not the point of it. And that also kind of goes to, we're really not supposed to focus on what other people think anyway. So the more we can just empower ourselves and be able to act, to be free to act and be involved in situations in our lives. And I think that's where the empowering aspect comes from, is you gain that power because you're able to be an active player in the game of life, and you're not just blaming others for everything that's going on in your life. It's part of that internal process, that seeking and that understanding that a lot of what we experience comes from our state within, not, somebody else saying something that just set us off, or even letting the things they say set us off, because we're realizing that those are something inside that we need to address and we need to look at, we need to work on.
Yeah. But I know exactly what you mean, but I remember when I was at the earlier stages of my spiritual development, it really used to upset me when people kept telling me, well, you create your own reality. And I just could not comprehend it. I couldn't. I was in victim mentality, and that is a natural state of being. When you're on your way of transitioning out of 3D, where we are taught that certain things happen to us. You're born into a certain situation. You cannot change anything about it. You just have to make the best of it. You just have to hustle and do this, that, and the other thing. It's all about doing instead of being. So it's actually quite a treacherous journey to realize spiritually that you do attract your life to a certain extent. But to hear that when you're at a different stage in that development is really, really detrimental, I think. It really put me into a downward spiral thinking, making things worse, making me feel even more like the victim, making me blame myself all the time, which was not helpful and not really what spiritual development is supposed to really achieve, namely to push you towards self-love as well as self-responsibility. But you're not able to take on this responsibility until you have reached a certain level of self-love, because otherwise you'll inevitably fall back into victim mode. Because we're still struggling with all the concepts of 3D, like having to please other people. What will other people think when I do this, that, or the other thing? When you actually establish boundaries, start recognizing what they are, and then, do your best to assert them, you still have to deal with the reaction of other people, and that is not easy. To have this kind of self-esteem, this innate spiritual self-esteem, to care yet not care about what other people think, that is really a learning process. And I believe if you are in a place where it hurts you to hear that you're responsible for your own life, it might just be detrimental. So maybe it's easier for you to hear you're responsible at least for your own reactions. Start with that. And in a way, 3D tells us that. The world around us tells us that. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't react like this. You shouldn't be mad at this. You should be more forgiving. You should. Yes and no. So yes, I believe it does start with being responsible for your own reactions. And that is hard enough, really hard enough, because we're triggered all the time. And who has time in the middle of the supermarket when somebody runs you over with their cart to sit down in meditation and process what the hell just happened? I mean, it's life, right? So forgive yourself for that. Go home and meditate and do differently next time. Note how I don't say do better next time. Do differently next time. With every bit of awareness, you will automatically change yourself and your response. But be gentle with yourself and get there slowly. Just become more aware. Move more into self-love and practice your responses. And that's really what we mean by self-responsibility. Be responsible for yourself, most of all, and then the rest will follow.
Yeah, great points. Definitely on the self-love and forgiveness. If you're not in that place of being able to love yourself and forgive yourself, like you say, you'll just kind of get stuck in this depressive trap of, oh, this is all my fault, and then you kind of start self-deprecating that you just get in that sludge and that depressive state.
Yeah, it is really a downward spiral. It is a rabbit hole that you can fall into so easily. And then you start remembering all the other spiritual things that you've learned. Like, forgive other people, but really you just want to lash out because you're hurting so badly. So you feel guilty about that. It's like, suddenly there's like this onslaught of things that you should be doing and nothing's working because you've just hit a really major thing that you have to deal with. And that's why I believe, if anything, if I had to decide on one thing that's going to help you move forward and through any obstacle, it is forgiveness. Because forgiveness moves us towards self-love. Everything else, all this, I should do this, I should do that. Why are we shooting all over ourselves all the time? Those are just expectations that we then have, which we may or may not meet. And again, we feel bad about something if we didn't meet it. We feel pressure. How does pressure help us stay centered and enjoying life, which is what we're supposed to do? Enjoy life and find happiness in every moment is really the goal of life. I mean, who manages to be there when all they have is a list of, I should do this, that, and the other thing? It is so overwhelming, and that's why so many of us give up and just want to numb out and watch TV for hours on end, so we don't have to think for a change. You know, it's natural, but it's quite fun actually when you get into a habit of learning to forgive yourself really quickly for anything really. Just the other day, if I may go ahead and share that, I realized that I was angry at myself for a situation that I really could not change because it's already here. I cannot change current reality. I can only change what's going to happen next. But feeling bad about it is not going to help me create a different reality. It's just going to keep me stuck in what I already don't want. So I sat down and tapped on forgiveness. And if I may show you real quick so you actually get something out of this more than us talking. If you find your thymus gland right here in the middle of your chest, and good thing I'm wearing something low cut, you can see it nicely. And just tap here and say, I forgive myself for, let's say, feeling guilty. And just do that until this feeling of guilt actually dissipates. You can do this kind of forgiveness exercise on almost anything, anytime during the day. And it helps you move forward so quickly and so easily in so many little things. You'll be amazed at how powerful this really is. It's quite lovely.
Nice. Thank you. I think we've discussed tapping a little bit, and I'd asked you for some tips on some of that because I wasn't real familiar. I'd kind of heard the general aspect of what it was about and kind of some basics, how to tap your brow a little and some of that, but I hadn't really heard much depth of it or practiced a whole lot of it myself. But I've definitely heard good results and a lot of people that really love it and get a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah, and tapping, that's a whole new topic which we can discuss at some point. You usually have this whole EFT sequence here. And here, and you can also do in an emergency the karate chop point. But the thymus gland, what it does, it immediately connects to your subconscious. So especially anything that you don't know how to change in your subconscious. You want to forgive, but you don't know how. Tap on it here, and it talks to a different layer of your being, and things will shift that just by doing that in your mind will not necessarily shift. I have a whole forgiveness program around that, which is quite powerful, really. So this is one of the emergency points that you can always tap. In another emergency, you can also tap the karate chop point. And the other meridian points are really to release energy out of your body in a different way. So, yeah, as I said, there's a whole lecture I could do on tapping alone, but this is already really powerful. And it helps with the aspect of responsibility and self-responsibility, just to practice some forgiveness. But I was wondering, what does self-responsibility have to do with a twin flame relationship, Jason?
So many things.
I know, right? How much time we got?
How are we running on time here?
About 15 minutes or so.
It gets really tricky, and you need to kind of be in practice of having this self-responsibility before you get in there, because there's so much that's intermingled with the other person that if you're not in this practice of being responsible for yourself and understanding that issues or upsets that come up or something internal that you need to look at, then it's totally going to go into a very blown up blame game of this other person is just horrible and they're doing this and they're doing that, and ironically, I mean, I know in my case, later on as I've been able to reflect and go back, it's like, yeah, it probably really wasn't as much them as I was blaming them or claiming it was them, and it was a lot more things that I should have been taking responsibility for. For one thing, there was a lot of my personal growth and development that I kind of got lazy and slacked on, and I mean, I really felt like we had such a great thing that it seemed like we could just kind of coast along in this blissful kind of state of wonder, when I didn't really need to be looking at that. I needed to be building a better vessel so we could really soar into this thing and live a great, wonderful life together, because we both had great vessels to explore life and live life in, and it becomes very uneven. You put a lot of weight on the other person whenever you let go of your responsibilities or don't take responsibilities for your own work and the things that you need to do inside. It becomes unbearable for the other person, because they feel this constant blame and pressure.
Yes, that's very important, I think, in twin flame relationships. The self-responsibility versus responsibility. Just because you love somebody unconditionally, especially as a twin flame, does not mean that only one of you does all the work. Self-responsibility becomes especially important. As we said in one of our earlier episodes, if you don't do your work, if you're not self-responsible enough to do your own work, things will start fizzling, because the other person cannot possibly hold the whole container of a relationship. It is not possible. Plus, you will inevitably separate, not necessarily physically that the relationship falls apart, but spiritually, if one continues their work, is self-responsible enough, continues their spiritual work and growth, while the other person doesn't, the other person will just kind of get dragged behind all the time. And that's tiring on many levels and annoying for both parties, really, because one person feels dragged and they don't really want to be dragged. I mean, who does? But they will feel it somehow, subconsciously, that something's going on. And the other person doesn't really want to drag the other person. So they get frustrated as well. So as in any relationship, but especially twin flame relationships, if you're not self-responsible enough to do your own work, it will get difficult.
Very much so. And with the accelerated growth that you go through in a twin flame kind of relationship, I think it just magnifies that effect even more, because yeah, we're both supposed to be responsible in doing our work, and if this is such an accelerated process to help us, as soon as that one person stops doing their work, then I mean, you feel that unbalance quickly, and if you can't stop and address that as soon as you feel it, it gets out of hand very fast.
Yeah, you cannot afford to become complacent. You cannot afford to be sucked back into 3D reality and only focus on money and work and neglect your spiritual growth. It does not work. The twin flame relationship is a spiritual journey, and that's how I would define it. This is a spiritual journey with yourself in another body. And yeah, if the other body, that person, does not follow suit, and there might always, obviously there's probably always, back and forth, although usually in my experience there's always one who's a bit further ahead in the spiritual development. But if the distance becomes too great, physically you might have to separate for a while until the other person can catch up without dragging the other person down. And I've heard that from a lot of couples, actually, that happens. That would also explain why twin flame relationships separate and then come back together once they've caught up a little bit. But if they don't get it, if they do not get to the point where they comprehend that they cannot become complacent at any given time, and I'm not saying to take breaks every once in a while, everybody needs those, but do not become complacent, you will just keep separating and then coming back together and separating and maybe not coming back together, which would be a really bad shame, really.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely have to step it up and be ready to take that path and make the progression. Mm-hmm. Like you say, it's definitely more of a spiritual journey, and as soon as we try to make it 3D or physical, it just becomes a mess in so many ways.
Yes, it does. But I think in this regard, twin flame relationships are not that different from other relationships, really. The nature of relationships might have changed, where women used to be the nurturing one and men used to be the one, providing with the 3D necessities, as in money, housing, etc. But really, there was always an interplay of spiritual nurturing in one way or another. And it doesn't really matter what it was and how it's shifted. We just have to keep up with what it is now. And it is all about self-responsibility, not just in a twin flame relationship, but generally. The world is being called to wake up. And I have so many clients out there who are saying that they want help. And then I ask them, are you willing to take the steps that are necessary to get you to a healthier, wholer being? They say, yes. And then when I ask them, okay, do you want to do this, that, and the other thing? No. It's okay, I don't understand. You just said you want to progress. So it's self-responsibility. Once you get to the point where you realize you are responsible for your own healing, somebody else can facilitate and hold the space for you, but it's still your intention, it's still your determination, it is your action that really gets you there. And people are waking up to that more and more. They realize that numbing out, whatever it means, is not really making them happier people. The people who are suffering right now and are still hesitant to actually take action steps, they'll have to wait until the discomfort becomes so unbearable that they finally do take the action steps. And I'm not blaming anybody here. We've all been there. And there are different times of our lives that we have to focus on different things too. That is all very natural. But there's always a point in time where the discomfort becomes so unbearable that we finally take the steps. And when it happens, it's different for everybody. So there's no blame. I'm just explaining the process here. But I'm hoping that when you see this and you feel discomfort, that this might inspire you, because there's really only two ways. There's staying in discomfort and trying to numb out in one way or another, whether it's shopping or TV or drugs or alcohol or perpetual sleep or depression and being medicated or whatever, or actually starting your spiritual journey and healing from the emotional trauma, from the pain that we've experienced through lifetimes, and actually making progress. There's really only two ways, I believe. And if you're in a twin flame relationship, this is what you've decided to do at some point. Just don't forget about what you actually wanted to do. Just because you found somebody that you feel so good with that you want to just kind of chill on the couch with them. It is a spiritual journey.
Yeah, and I think I mean, whether it be twin flame or any spiritual path or journey, that's a lot of the stumbling block that I see people kind of get into is initially you start the path of this is going to be great and you see, you know, kind of the end results that other people have had, but you don't consider the work that it takes to get from where you are to that end result. And in that process, you're facing all of your pains, your hurts, your everything that's built up and caused issues, and you've got to deal with that at some point. It's not something, you know, we can just shove down and ignore. The more we shove down and ignore, the more that's going to come up and bite us later at some point. It's setting up our own time bombs basically in our system the more we do that, because whether we want to or not, we're going to deal with it at some point. We can choose to consciously deal with it at an aware state and responsibly, or, you know, like you referred to, we can walk around and just shove these things down and let people trigger us, and it's going to bubble up and come out at probably the most inappropriate times and when we really don't want to be dealing with it.
Yeah. Like throwing stuff in the supermarket at other people. Yep, all been there. None of us is perfect, people. That's what I'm trying to say here. We've all gone through our stuff. We've all done interesting things that are rather not repeat on video. But yeah, there's stuff for everybody. And it is your self-responsibility to take care of it. Yeah. Well, good session today, I think. We're almost out of time. So I'm not sure what we are going to talk about next week. Jason, do you have an inspiration?
Nothing's coming to mind right now, but I'm sure between now and then we will have a few things that we'll come up with.
Yeah, plenty of things usually. Or again, please go ahead, send us your questions, your comments. We love to be interactive. We don't really like to lecture. We love to be interactive more than anything. Be responsive to whatever comments we get and the energy that's coming in. So please make use of our Facebook pages. Jason's and mine are going to be under the video. And subscribe to our newsletter for special offers like the Healing by Donation offer that's coming up next week for the eclipse, the solar eclipse. That's going to be an interesting weekend. So I'm going to offer Healing by Donation again. And bookings open next week. So things like that are going to be sent out via the newsletter. And whenever Jason has something special, he's going to send it out as well. So make sure that you subscribe and leave comments, share the video. Thank you for attending. And then we'll hope to see you again next Monday. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, great session. Look forward to seeing you again next week.
Okay, well, take care, everybody. Till next time. Bye.